All right. So, aloha, everyone. My name is Brennan Morioka. I'm the Dean for the College of Engineering here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and we want to welcome everybody to our monthly leadership seminar series, sponsored by the Hayashida Ohana, Ken and Donna Hayashida. And actually, I believe I even see Ken in the audience today. So mahalo, Ken, for your support for this leadership seminar series, which I think for those of you who have participated or listened in on our many sessions, is really meant to give our students and our College Ohana a little bit different perspective on things, especially when it comes to leadership as they embark on their next phase of their lives once they leave the university. Learning about the challenges and experiences of some of our community's top leaders. And we are extremely grateful to have a couple of our friends here today. I love and I'm honored to be able to call them friends, Laurie and Ann Teranishi, and they will be joining us here today. And I'm going to kick it off. I'm not sure if it's Adam or Mia who are going to be leading us in the intros, but I'm going to kick it off to our two engineering student ambassadors to take it over from here. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy today's seminar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mia, and today with me is Adam. Again, we'd like to welcome everyone to our third leadership seminar series of the spring semester, presented by the Hayashida family. Let's get started. We have two great speakers here today, Laurie and Ann Teranishi. We'll start off by introducing the two.
All right. So Laurie Teranishi is the founder and CEO of IQ360, a woman and minority-owned business communications consultancy that develops and executes strategies to help organizations manage major change initiatives. IQ360 is comprised of a diverse group of consultants headquartered in Honolulu, with teams in San Francisco, New York, and also Washington, D.C. Laurie has 25 years of experience providing award-winning strategic communications counsel to global corporations, innovative startups, nonprofits, and also government agencies. She combines her operating experience managing large-scale P&Ls with her track record of launching communications campaigns that advance her clients' business goals. And also before establishing IQ360, Laurie was vice president of product development at Visa, where she also served as chief of staff to the chief operating officer and worked in a variety of communication roles.
Now, Ann Teranishi is President and Chief Executive Officer of American Savings Bank and also is a member of the ASB Board of Directors. Ann has been a part of ASB since 2007. She previously served as Executive Vice President of Operations and was responsible for delivering operational improvements to enhance the overall customer experience. She played a key role in transitioning ASB from more traditional branch-centric operations to online and other self-service options, with that have become increasingly popular, and has received numerous recognitions for her business leadership and community contributions, including from Pacific Business News Women Who Means Business, Hawaii Business Magazine 20 for the Next 20, and Girl Scouts Women of Distinction. Ann is a Omidyar Fellow. She serves on the boards of the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii, Island Insurance Company, and Hawaii Cellular Therapy and Transplant Center, and the U.S.-Japan Council. Now we'll have Laurie and Ann begin with any opening remarks they'd like to share.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for those introductions. And since I'm the older sister, I guess I will go first. Ann likes to always remind me of that. It used to be a good thing, and now it's not. But we do have a series of slides to share. But before I go into it, what we want to talk about today, we're calling our presentation The Real World, and 8 things that they didn't tell me in school. And so what we hope to do is have you think about your career a little differently. So when you leave this hour presentation, and thank you so much, by the way, for giving us an hour of your valuable time. I know you could be studying or sleeping, so thank you for being here. But when you leave this discussion, I hope that we will have convinced you that there's a more fulsome way to look at your career, and one that I didn't realize until I had been out of school for some time. So that's what I hope you feel when you leave this call. As I think about all of you on this call today, I'm going to go out on a little bit on a limb, and I hope I don't get in trouble with Dean Morioka here. But if I were to give all of you a Myers-Briggs personality test, for those of you who I'm sure most of you have heard about this, but it's a personality test. When you go into the corporate world, a lot of times you have to do these kinds of things, and it puts you into a category. And so I would think 90% of you are probably more left brain thinkers, right? And so the first thing I want to share with you is that you represent a pretty small minority of the world. Most people, a lot of people are not left brain thinkers. I mean, I myself am not one. And right now, the world is experiencing such great shifts, transformation brought about by climate change, by political upheaval. We see the war in Ukraine, just see changes in technology transformation. And so that requires leaders who don't think exclusively with their left brains, right? You have to understand human behavior. There's facts and science and process, but leaders who don't bump up against the Peter Principle, which I'm not sure if you guys have heard of, but the Peter Principle, where you advance to a certain level in your career and then you top out because you don't have the skills necessary. Leaders that are truly able to lead in this world have both left and right brains. So a lot of what Anne and I are going to talk about today will be encouraging you to step outside maybe the left brain world. And actually, even if you're a right brain person, a lot of these things are really hard to do too. So it's for anyone, okay? Anyone that's new in their career. And I am hoping that you can apply all of these things throughout your career. So let me share some slides here. I hope this works. Okay. All right. So 8 things they didn't tell me in school. And by the way, as we're going through these 8, I hope all of you feel uncomfortable, because when you feel uncomfortable, that means you're growing. I'm actually uncomfortable right now. People think that I speak a lot in public, and people think, oh, that she's a communications person, she's right brain, she likes to talk, which Anne will tell you is kind of true. But I'm a little bit uncomfortable right now. I didn't know there's going to be this many people dialing in. So when you're uncomfortable, you're growing. Okay, but remember that. Okay. So the first thing they didn't tell me in school was that I will remain a student for the rest of my career and love it. And that's only if you have the right mindset. So when you leave University of Hawaii Engineering School and maybe many of you think, yay, I'll be done. Okay, please don't think that, because the leaders that are out there that end up, when you're in your 20s, everybody's kind of the same, right? You're all in engineering firms, or you're kind of all in your entry-level jobs, and everybody's doing the same thing. And then when you start to pull into your 30s, you start to see some people, pulling ahead, getting different kinds of assignments. And then your 40s and 50s, there's only a few people that kind of make it to the top positions. And those people generally have done the things that we're going to talk about with you today. So I talked earlier in the beginning part about the huge changes we're seeing because of political change, technology transformation, social media. And this change, I believe, is only going to accelerate in the next 2 years. I mean, look at the changes, the huge changes we saw in the workplace in the last 2 years. And look at how people are viewing social justice issues. That all came about in the last 2 years. People are now questioning their entire lives and what the meaning of life is. They don't want to work for companies that are just companies. They want to work for companies that have a higher purpose. So people have changed, the workplace has changed, the world is changing. We have an existential threat to us brought about by climate change. So if you are going to operate as a leader in this world of change, you are going to advantage yourself if you look at being a student for the rest of your life. So what does that mean? It means you have to read voraciously. Read the New York Times, read the Wall Street Journal, try to soak up information in areas that aren't familiar to you or maybe aren't comfortable to you, and seek out new experiences. So for example, when I was new in my career, I was really in this communications PR track, and I stayed in that lane. I just wanted to be really good at my job. I wanted to really master communication. But I was selected at different times to lead different initiatives. So for example, I led Visa's first diversity initiative in the late 90s. And I didn't really want to do it because it was scary. I was going to have to work with people that were much higher level than me. And I also was uncomfortable because, I was working in a fairly homogenous corporate environment. And I thought, am I just being picked because, I'm a minority? But I had to kind of change my thinking and say, this is an opportunity. And so that experience actually led to me meeting a lot more people in the company than just my narrow communications group. And so those experience and leading an initiative where there was not a lot of structure, diversity, especially at that time, also taught me how to lead in a murky area. So that's just one example of how you can step outside the narrow confines of your job and experience new things. And so that kind of takes me to the second point. Oops, shoot. Really, one of the best ways to continuously learn is to network. So I don't have to tell all of you this. I mean, it's sort of common knowledge that relationships are crucial wherever you go. I'm sure in your lives today as students, you have to work in teams, and that extends out to when you go into the work world. Sometimes it's hard to make the time, to carve out the time to relationship build, because you are going to, in an entry-level job, work like a dog, or I hope you will. The entry-level jobs are not fun. My daughter started her first entry-level job a few years ago, and she was like, oh my gosh, I have to work all these weekends at nights. Yeah, it's an entry-level job. And you're not valuable to your company until you've been there for a year, okay? So don't complain and keep working. But I will argue that cultivating these relationships is well worth your time, and your mindset. If you have the mindset that you're going to devote time to this, that's very helpful to you, because every day you're going to have to make a trade-off decision. Should I devote one more hour to this really important project, or am I going to take the time to go have that cup of coffee to meet with this person, or take the time to go and talk to someone in the other department and just see what they're doing, what they're working on, so you can, establish that relationship and learn things. So, I believe that all of this makes a difference, and you never know who you're going to connect with. Networking is not kind of a selfish endeavor. I would posit that if you look at networking as, hey, I might learn something new, I might meet someone new, and a really great surprise is 10 years down the road, a person that you invested time in and they invested time in you, beautiful things can happen. They can become a client, they can become someone who hires you. You never know. Anne, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say, Lori and I are both pretty extroverted people, and really enjoy engaging with people. And Lori talked about engineers. My husband is an electrical engineer, and so he is extremely thoughtful, analytical, and definitely the smart one of the two of us. But I admire engineers so much and how they think. And so I would say when you think about networking, it's not about volume. So if the idea of going into a crowded room and glad handing and meeting a lot of people is totally overwhelming, I get it. I'm actually very much a people person, but that's actually not how I like to engage people. So do it in your own way. And networking isn't how many business cards, and well, that's not even how people do it now, LinkedIn profiles that you connect with or however you want to do it. It's really the quality of the connection. When we got on the call and we were waiting to get started, I saw Kim, and Kim and I participated in a panel months ago, and just remembering, hey, we were together, and I think the more occasion we have to see each other and get to know each other, that's how connection is built. So it doesn't have to be so formulaic, or you got to go to a big pauhana and meet 20 people. That's actually probably not the most valuable way. And so it could just be done over time. And right now when you're in school, there's so many opportunities. So again, kudos to particularly like Adam and Mia being so involved as they are, or for those of you dialing in, these are really great opportunities. So however you want to pace it, but just make it part of how you're thinking about things. Once a month, I'm going to reach out to somebody and connect with them is a perfect place to start.
Yeah, I love that thought, Anne. And networking, I guess that's kind of a bad term. I wish I could think of it. I'm a word person, so I don't know why I can't think of a better term off the top of my head, but it's relationship building. And that can come in many forms. Like Anne said, it's not quantity necessarily, but it can also be your neighbor. It can be your uncle. It can be a childhood friend. So, the more connections you make with people, I know I just am, contradicting myself, but when you do make some of these connections, it's, you add to the richness of your life. So it's not just about, advancing your agenda, but really adding to the richness of your life. Okay. So thank you, Anne. So now I'm going to go to the third point of things they didn't tell me in school. So with sufficient self-awareness, drive, and discipline, you too can do the kind of work and be the kind of person you dream of becoming. So, okay, I know what you're thinking. Well, some of you may be thinking, what is she talking about? This sounds so pie in the sky, but I believe it is good to have a vision of where you want to go. And it doesn't have to materialize, but what kind of career do you want to have? It's nice to have an end state kind of in mind, only because for me, I didn't really do that right away. I just wanted to get a job, and I graduated in the middle of a recession, so it was hard to get one. And so it took me a few years to kind of envision what I actually wanted. But the reason I think it's worthwhile, and probably 7 times out of 10, what manifests itself isn't what your vision actually was. But if you have a vision, it encourages you to adopt the kind of behaviors that we're telling you about today, that will get you to an end state that's a good one, and so even if it's not exactly how you envisioned, you'll get to a leadership position. So for myself, eventually, not immediately, because of course nobody told me when I was in school I should do this, I wanted to be the head of a corporate communication function for a major Fortune 500 company before I was 50. Okay, so that didn't happen. I ended up leaving Visa and starting a company, which is IQ360. But because I was for many years developing the skill sets that I needed to be the head of that corporate function, all of those skills that I devoted time to help me today in my job. So I believe I have a level of confidence to be counseling my clients. I believe that I've learned, how to take risks. I believe that I've learned how to be persuasive in my arguments. And all of those things come from putting myself in these uncomfortable growth positions. And the other thing about self-awareness that because I put that, of course you need to have drive, you need to have discipline. Those things are given if you want to be successful in a career. But self-awareness is something that is a little bit harder, I think, to understand or to sort of act on. And I believe that we have to look at ourselves kind of in an unbiased way if we can, and realize what our shortcomings are. And it's fine if you can do that, you can see where you need to grow. It's a good thing. Like I as an Asian woman, I had to figure out, how to kind of bust through some of the cultural norms that I had grown up with to be successful in the mainland in a pretty rough and tumble corporate environment. So I had to learn to pound my fist on the table a little bit, not apologize as much. And so that was some self-awareness. I started realizing, wow, like people don't really listen to me that much, but I wasn't making my arguments forcefully enough or persuasively enough. So that's where the self-awareness comes out. And then the one last thing I will say on this topic is that once you determine your path and where you want to be, you should become, you remember the first point I made about always being a student, even after you leave the doors of UH. So study the path for other people who have become successful, have achieved that goal. Because if you notice, a lot of doctors' kids become doctors. A lot of lawyers' kids become lawyers because you know why? They've been exposed. They see the path. I mean, maybe it's true with engineers too, but you need to talk to people and observe the path. And it doesn't mean that you're going to end up in that path. I didn't, but at least it helps, you funnel your thinking and how you might grow that career.
So I'll just quickly chime in here. It's okay if you don't have a clear articulation. I've heard advice, particularly as a female leader, I've heard a lot of advice about being the CEO of your own career. And I probably was not as crystal clear and goal-oriented as Lori was, and defining what exactly does that mean. I actually started my career as an attorney, and was quite happy in that career, and something kind of bumped me into banking. And so if you don't exactly know, it's okay. I think just having an openness of, I want to continue to grow and develop. And over time, I realized I had a knack of team building and working with people regardless of the topic. And that became a passion of mine. And interestingly, I never had as a goal to be the CEO and president or even an executive of a company. But mentors throughout my life, and actually my father being one of my mentors early in life, had told me, I can see you. This is when I was still in high school or college, being a CEO or president of a company. And I thought he was nuts, and I thought he was crazy, because actually Lori and I are super close, but we're very different personalities. She is driven. That's why she is the founder of a company. And so I always said, that's really like Lori and you, Dad. That's your personality. I really see that. But I think sometimes people will see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And there's different styles and leadership qualities that can make you perfectly qualified for a position that you can't see for yourself. So I would say I totally agree with Lori said. It's just it might be a little bit more meandering. And when I went to law school, I was told most of you will have 5 to 6 different careers. And I thought that was crazy, because investing in law school for me was a big financial investment and a lot of time. And look at me now, I'm not a practicing attorney, and I've done a number of different positions in the bank. So I think the advice Lori gives is exactly spot on, but it might change over time. But directionally, where do you want to go is probably what's really important.
Yeah, that is really good feedback. And yeah, I mean, being open is really important. Being open to experiences, not only seeking experiences, but being open to what the universe brings to you. I do yoga, so I know that sounds like hippie trippy, but being open to all of these things, like if you open your mind, you'll be amazed at, all these opportunities that come to you, and you're going to be able to take advantage of them. Life is not linear, and that's what actually makes life and your career so amazing, and the opportunity ahead of you so amazing. I mean, I don't know very much about engineering. I wish I did, because like Anne said, Eric is the smartest one among all of us. Her electrical engineering husband, that's not a question. But I just think the field of engineering, no matter what area you're going into, is also changing so much. So being open, sets you up to capitalize, to take advantage of those changes, to be one step ahead. And that kind of brings me to the next point. And this is my final one, then I'll turn it over to Anne. So just, you only have to bear with me for a few more minutes. But you've probably heard this. I think you have heard this. You have to have business acumen if you want to reach the top of your profession, or if you want to reach any top leadership position. You cannot just be a good communications person or a good engineer and think along those lines. You have to be able to see, first of all, in whatever organization you're in, you have to be able to see outside the narrow confines of your organization, right? So that, requires a worldview. It's not just what's happening in Hawaii in the business community, what's happening in the US. It's looking at the world and looking outside of business or your whatever area you're working. If you're working in government, looking outside of government. And actually, Anne talked about going to law school. I realized because I started taking on different assignments at Visa and going outside the PR lane. So after I did that, after I co-chaired Visa's diversity committee, I co-chaired a couple of other cross-functional groups. And I remember, this was so humiliating to me. I remember being in a strategy group for Visa, and there was a chart on the screen, and I asked one of the heads of the consumer debit group at Visa, like, oh, what is CAGR? And for those of you who don't know it, it means compound annual growth rate, but I didn't know that. And then there were all these, Ivy League MBAs that were in the room, because Visa had very high performing people. And they looked at me and I just felt like, wow, I'm really dumb. So then and there, I decided I have to learn more about business. I have to learn more about banking, because I can't just be a good communicator, a good marketer. And it eventually led me to get an MBA. But you don't have to get an MBA to have business acumen. You just have to look at and ask yourself the question, what are the business drivers for my organization? How does my organization make money? How does it lose money? What are the big risks to my organization? What's coming up over the horizon that I should be prepared for? So even if I am in the most entry-level job, you're connecting what you're doing to the company's larger goals. And as you advance up the ladder in whatever organization you are in, that mindset, and you'll continue to learn more about the business and the outside world, that mindset will serve you well, and you will distinguish yourself, and you will not top out at the Peter Principle and not be able to advance anymore, because you'll really be thinking about the strategic goals of the company and how to get there, how to reach them. So go outside your functional areas, whatever job you take, even if you take a job in the government, you're an engineer in Department of Transportation, seek out ways to go outside of your engineering division. If you're at an engineering firm, are there ways to participate in the construction industry, with other professionals? Anne was on the board of the chamber. I think that's where she has spoken with some other people on different panels. You'll get exposure to people in other industries too. So that all helps you to build your business acumen. And now I'm going to turn it over to Anne to go through the last four.
Thanks, Lori. So what Lori said is exactly right. I think, now in the role that I'm in, a lot of the work that I did prior to taking on this role as CEO of the bank was mostly insular. So I was in a lot of internal roles, and now my role is much more outward facing. So even if you're starting your career and it's fairly internal, you never know when that will pivot. So in addition to it being a driver and you being able to have greater impact and make significant contributions, you never know when your roles can change too, right? So if you're not kind of preparing and staying open and curious, and that's kind of goes back to networking too. It's just talking to people, whether, my son plays soccer. I spent a lot of time at the YPO soccer field, just talking to parents and what they're working on and their world, and learning what drives their business or their nonprofit work is a great way to learn. So the lesson number 5 is not to let a failure deter you. This is actually a really hard lesson. I think in the last 10 years plus, the concept of fail fast, fail early is a lot more well understood. I don't think that was really the case when Lori and I were starting off in our careers. And I would say we probably have more learned this over time. And I think there's a greater understanding and acceptance of things like design thinking and prototyping, and just going for things and gating things so you can try things, and not, if you fail, it's not too big of a failure. It's really working and learning as you go. I guess, so I think you're all very familiar with that. I don't want to pretend like I'm an expert on the philosophy of it, but just a couple of personal things is, people always ask me, do you have any regrets? And I'm not somebody who has a lot of regrets. Once I've decided on something, I feel like try to make the best decision with the information I have, whether it's in my personal life or career. So I'm not one that looks back with regret. I look back with curiosity, as now knowing what I know, would I've made the same decision? And the places where I reflect back and think about that, would I have made just different decisions with the information and experience I have now? Absolutely. I definitely am a more risk cautious. I don't think I'm a risk averse person. I'm a risk cautious person, much more so than Lori is. Like, that's why she's the started her own company, right? I just think I'm a huge fan of Lori's, and I consider her a mentor and a role model of, a strong leader who's just decided, I'm going to go out and do this myself. I was a little bit more cautious. So are there places in my career I would have taken on more and should have taken on more risk? Yes. Has that hampered me? No, but I think I would have done a little bit more and tried a little bit more. That's why I told Adam and Mia, boy, I'm not sure if in college I took some leadership roles, but I don't know if I would have volunteered to lead a leadership panel like this. I think I would have been a little intimidated. So I give major kudos. So like, those are the places. And when you're in school in particular, it is such a safe place to try it. It gets, the ante gets a little bit higher as you start entering your profession, but don't lean away with it from it. So I would just say risk-taking is a big one. A place where you can specifically try risk-taking without it being a high bar or signing up to be a facilitator of a panel is speaking up. So, there's going to be an opportunity, if we move through these slides efficiently, to ask some questions. So in situations like this, speaking up and pushing yourself to ask a question when you've never asked before, or voicing an opinion or an idea when a professor asks, or when you don't agree when a fellow student has an opinion or an idea. I would say speaking up is a really easy way to practice risk-taking. And what's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody doesn't agree with you, or it didn't come out exactly as you planned. So I'm a very extroverted person now. I was actually quite a shy child growing up. And I think it's because my sister is such a effervescent, enthusiastic person. So I could just rely on her to do a lot of the talking. But I think it's really important to speak up and voice your opinion. And I've learned that over time. And I would say, not quite a regret, but places where I wished I had done something a little bit different is speaking up sooner. So I've never regretted speaking up. I've thought I wish I had done it a little bit sooner. So it's an easy way to frame. And maybe speaking up's not your thing. There's probably some people who are like, I speak up all the time. That's not your thing. Then find something else. But try to actually identify for yourself, not make this a conceptual thing, but find a place where you're willing to try something out and put yourself out there. This is really interesting, and maybe it's a little bit more conceptual in nature. Maybe folks have talked about managing versus leading, you know, there's lots of different definitions, lots of articles, books on it. So again, I won't try to give you the academic version, but for a lot of young people, there's a huge aspiration to be a manager of a team, and that is how people kind of gauge their progress. And so if you do have an interest in being in a leadership role where you're going to be influencing others, managing and management skills are very important. It's, you know, setting goals, moving organizations or groups of people together to accomplish things. That is, you know, there's some science and there's some art around it, but leadership is something that can be practiced immediately. And I think the best managers of people actually are excellent leaders. So I just want to make sure that as you guys think about where you want to be in your careers and how you're thinking about what it means to be a leader, it doesn't mean people listening to what you say, or, you know, that you're in control of a bunch of people, but can you really help influence and have people want to move in a direction collectively together because you can set a vision, or you have a voice or an opinion that really is bringing up a diversity of viewpoint that might not have been part of the original conversation. So that's what I actually spend a lot of time with when I work with mentoring people individually. Once they're in corporate practice, they're very focused on what's the next step to lead a bigger team or the next step up. I worked at the bank for 13 years before I moved laterally for 13 years. And I think a lot of people are not patient in that, and they would be gauging, am I moving up? Am I moving down? Am I having bigger teams? And actually my path was really up and down, and it's really not so much about the metrics of the number of people. I don't know, Lori, did you want to share any
I 100% agree with what you said, except for the fact that I crowded you out with my speaking. And like, so that's why you were quiet. No, I'm just kidding. That probably was true. But fortunately, Anne found her voice. And I actually, as a side note, I am also a huge fan of Anne. And it's funny, they say that in the best mentoring relationships, you know, the mentee becomes the mentor. So Anne is 5 years younger than me, but she is a mentor to me. And so I just consider it a privilege that we're also sisters. What Anne said, though, about moving laterally, I think is a really important concept, because if you look at corporations today, they're not the corporations of 50 years ago or even 20 years ago. Hierarchies are flattening, right? So you see flattening across organizations, or at least a lot of organizations are flattening. So you can't judge your success by how many departments are under you. That's an old way of thinking. Another old way of thinking is exactly what Anne said, is counting how many people report to you. You know, we are often called in to manage major change initiatives. There's a huge merger and acquisition. A company is completely shifting their business model. And when we go and manage these change initiatives, the communication is only successful if it's communicated by the right people at the right time. And we go in and we look at who in the organization is an influencer that people listen to. And a lot of times these leaders are not, of course, they're the CEO and the C-suite leaders, but a lot of times there are people embedded in the organizations. Sometimes they are individual contributors, but they're high-level individual contributors. So being a leader doesn't mean you even need to have a team. You can be an individual contributor and lead the company or lead initiatives very effectively. So that's also, I think, an important point to remember.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Lori has been a mentor to me throughout throughout my life and my career. And people also, I was actually just meeting with somebody a little bit before this call who asked me the question about, you know, have you had mentors? You know, when we were starting in our careers, the concept of mentorship was out there, but there wasn't a lot of formalization around it. I think there's a lot more discussion and programmatic approaches to it now. So there's many opportunities for you folks to seek out a mentor, but also having informal mentor relationships and trusted advisors has been hugely important to me. And of course, like Lori and I said, the two of us really lean on each other, and our parents are huge influences in how we approach not just our careers, but our lives, right? But I think it has to feel natural to you. When we talked about building your network or making forming relationships, some of the people who have advised me, it's been formalized. I've had many people at my workplace who've been mentors and coaches to me, but I've also formed informal groups of people. I had this group of women that we started a few years ago that was meeting every month, and they were in all different industries, and we would seek advice from each other. So don't get too hung up on it being like this, somebody who's very senior to you giving you advice. But the one thing I would want to say is I would never be in this position that I'm in right now if not for a series of people in both my personal and professional life urging and pushing me to take on broader and more challenging, in Lori's words, uncomfortable roles. That would have never happened. And it's probably a little bit of, like I said, I wasn't, this is the direction I want to take, but lots of people nudging. And I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who will see things in you that you don't see in yourself. Sometimes positive things, sometimes things that would help you better self-assess. What do I need to work on and focus on to be a better leader, a better contributor. So this has been a tremendous and a very important part of my life, and it continues to be. And then wanting to be able to do that for others, because it's just been hugely, hugely important. But again, it does not have to be formalized, and it can't be forced. In my mind, it's great to have mentorship programs. I think it's a great way to build your network and connect and learn from others. But mentorship, true mentorship that lasts through the years, is much more organic. And if you haven't found that relationship yet, don't worry and don't be in such a hurry to find that, because the ones that last a lifetime really will happen over time. It's kind of like friendships, right? You can't force a friendship. You really have to make space for it. Okay, and we want to make sure that we leave a little time for questions. So the last thing I wanted to touch on, and I know Lori has some thoughts to share here too, is people skills are so important. We touched on that. Oh, you can hear the siren in the background. I'm sure you guys are hearing the same thing. But people skills are so important. I am not a technician. I'm a process-oriented person and a little analytical because I was a legally trained person, but not technical to the degree of somebody who is trained in engineering or in finance. And it's okay, because I think having a knack for working with people is really important to leadership roles that I've held, is to be able to attract and draw extremely smart people who can work collectively very well together is the job that I have now, right? I am not the person that has all the ideas. Actually, if I were a leader that had all the ideas, we probably wouldn't be thinking of things as openly and as flexibly as we should, right? I think when Lori talked about the old way of doing things, is things really came top down. The president or the CEO or the leader of the company would have all the ideas and the rest of the group would be to execute. That's not the way the world works today. And so people skills are really the things that have helped me navigate in my career, and surprisingly so, the things that have pushed me into the leadership positions I've had. And what I mean by people skills, it's really, really caring and being interested in others is a very good starting point. So it doesn't have to be a technical skill set. Lori probably will talk a little bit about communication, both oral and written communication. As a leader or as somebody that's starting off in your career, it doesn't matter what you know. If you can't communicate that, or if you can't advocate for an idea or a position, it doesn't matter what you know, right? It won't ever get out there. So if you're working on this, don't give up. And you're always a student here. I continue to work on this. And particularly, I'm not quite a year into my new role. The people skills that are required for this role are somewhat the same, but a little bit different. So I'm learning as I go too. So it's a very humbling experience, and probably lots of occasions where I'm getting things a little bit wrong, but adjusting and adapting. And that's part of the process of anybody taking on a new and challenging position. So I'll stop there, Lori.
Yeah, and I mean, Anne's right. If again, just going back to the first point, viewing your career as a continuous learning opportunity, I have had to really work on my listening skills, because in my profession, picking up on nuance is hugely important. It can make the difference between a successful outcome and a failed one. And you have to be able to pick up on those nuances. So when we talk about people skills becoming more and more important as your work becomes more consequential, as you take on more and more responsibility, your decisions and your actions affect greater numbers of people. So there's a lot of responsibility with that. And the way that you can minimize risk is to develop your people skills so that you can, in a room, what people are saying to you, what's coming out of their mouths, you can vet if what's coming out of their mouths is really what they're feeling, because in Hawaii, we're famous for that, right? I had to learn that when I came back from the mainland, that, oh, wow, what people tell you is not always what they're thinking, right? So you've got to read their nonverbal cues. You have to have people in the organization that you trust that will tell you what people are thinking. Well, how do you develop those relationships? All of that comes together. You have people you can trust who are going to tell you the truth. That's what's going to make you successful as a leader. You have to have the political savvy to know, hey, you know what? Because you're thinking outside your lane, right? You're going to know that, hey, these people in this group, they have this agenda or hidden agenda. So how am I going to help them see why we can be successful together? So that is the kind of nuance and understanding you have to build, to ultimately be one of these real leaders in an organization. So before I turn it over to questions, I just want to wrap this up by saying that it's really a privilege to talk to you. When I was in school, even to this day, some of the things that I really appreciated were hearing an outside perspective. And so I hope that you feel that your time was well spent today, listening to some of these ideas that we're putting forth. And I really hope that we've convinced you to look at your entire career as a continuous learning opportunity, and that you should embrace being uncomfortable. It's good to be uncomfortable, and it's even good to fail. Failure is good because it only makes you stronger and better and a more developed leader in the end. So thank you very much, and we're happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that insight. Those life lessons, I'm definitely going to be applying it in my own life, because it was very, very good, very comprehensive, and very important, I feel. So thank you very much. So for the next few minutes of the leadership seminar, we're going to have a Q&A portion. So audience, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Lori and Anne, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them.
So one question is, what are some specific ways you suggest to develop people skills further?
I think that just trying things out, right? So if you, we didn't actually touch on this, but particularly when you're starting off in your career, you're building your brand immediately. And so taking every opportunity to think about, am I putting forth a quality email or work product, or how am I presenting myself? And you're not going to get it perfectly, but to be pretty cognizant. Lori and I will probably debrief after and said, what do we think went well or didn't go well about this panel? It's a learning opportunity. This is new content for us to share. And so I think, Naoki, to to really try the things that are particularly the least comfortable for you. The things that you're probably feeling pretty proficient at is great to maintain, but I would just say just practicing. So the easiest one is speaking up. So there's always a reluctance to ask questions. So kudos to you for being the first to ask a question. I think that's a good place to start. And it's a muscle. The more you do it, it'll still be uncomfortable, but a little less uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's really interesting. I know people think marketing people are all really talkative and, right brain creatives, but in our company at IQ, most people are actually more left brained. I've tried to figure this out. I don't understand. So people at our company, they are less likely to speak up a lot. And so we've been trying to encourage people, just like Anne has said, that use internal meetings to really try things out and put things out there. Because if you fail, it doesn't matter. So developing people skills right now in school is great with your own close group of friends, so that if you fail, it's not as uncomfortable. And getting out there and just being on a nonprofit board, or going and volunteering, where you're put into situations where you meet different people. You can develop a range of skills just in volunteer work. So there's a lot of different ways that you can build those people skills.
Yeah, I agree. Being in college, I think I personally stick to things I more know and are more comfortable with. And it's really important to branch out and put yourself in not uncomfortable situations, but just to improve you as a person in general.
So our next question is, so you, from the chat, you both work with leaders who are engineers, for example, Rich Walker and Governor Ige. So how was that experience working with someone who is both kind of an engineering mind and also a leadership kind of mind?
I think Rich, who has been a mentor of mine and been one of those people that pushed me along in my career, is probably not maybe your stereotypical engineer, but he was methodical and process oriented, but also a big thinker. Interestingly, we actually had quite a number of engineers sitting on our management committee. So I think it's good, like, to me, to build a right leadership team is you want to have a diversity of those perspectives. So it was awesome to work with Rich and how he thought about things. And he really did have sort of an orderly way to move us through, but also a big thinker. So kind of right and left brain combined. I'll stop there to make sure that we can answer as many questions as possible. Lori, did you want to talk about Governor Ige?
Well, Governor Ige, yeah, is an engineer, and he doesn't forget anything. He actually has, he remembers a lot of things. Anything you tell him, he's going to remember. And I think, what I've learned from working with engineers, I worked with a lot of engineers in Silicon Valley. And so to work effectively, it's helpful. Just when you get into the work world, one of the reasons why corporations advocate doing these personality tests is it teaches you what kind of person you are and how you absorb information and make decisions, and how people that are different than you take in information and make decisions. And so engineers probably diametrically opposed. I'm an ENTJ, so an engineer is probably whatever the opposite of that. IS, I think it's still T, but P maybe. Anyway, the point is that I believe that you have to understand whether it's an engineer or not, how they think, how they process information. And if it is a more linear, process-oriented way of thinking, then presenting your ideas in a way that they can understand and absorb. So actually, when we talked about building people skills at the end, that's actually crucial to your success, is being able to learn how different people will absorb and take your information, and what's the best way to get them to say yes, to get them to, persuade them.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's interesting to, and people have all different types of mindsets, so it's interesting to kind of hear. what people like. If you're an engineer, you have like probably a certain mindset. If you're like a communications person, I'm sure you have a different one. So it's interesting to hear kind of how people think differently for me personally.
So with many of your peers living on the mainland, why did you both choose to live here and make a difference in Hawaii?
You want me to start, Anne? I mean, I came back after being gone for over 20 years. Anne can talk about how she came back relatively quickly after law school, but you know, it never got easier for me after I came to visit my family for the once or twice a year trips. I would be depressed when I went back. And I think it's because even though there are a lot of career opportunities and there are a lot of good people on the mainland, I felt like this was the best place to raise children because, and the community, you know, I really admire the leaders in Hawaii, and I want to be a leader in Hawaii that embodies the traits that I value in the leaders I see here. I do a lot of work in the ESG, environmental, social, and governance space. And it seems like people are just cluing in to the fact that we need to do things in the community, you know, well, leaders here in Hawaii were doing things in the community decades ago. They've always been doing things for the community. So you can't be Anne Teranishi and be the CEO of American Savings Bank and not be volunteering on the weekends, not thinking about what is our bank's place in this community and how are we going to impact the community and think about doing things to drive the future of Hawaii. That is how leaders here think. And so that's what I wanted to be a part of. And I truly believe that we have some of the most amazing leaders in the state of Hawaii. And I believe that we have something to teach the world in terms of how we operate here as leaders.
Yeah, nothing further to add to that, Lori. I'm also simultaneously trying to address some of the questions. I know we're running out of time.
She's a process person and I'm the talker.
Well, thank you very much to Lori and Anne. And I also see your mother in the audience. So hi, Mrs. Teranishi.
Uh-oh, I hope we...
you guys did well. But thank you very much. I love talking to both Anne and Lori and picking their brains. They're just fantastic leaders here in our community. So very much a privilege and honor to have you folks join us today and share some of your experiences. You made the lives of Mia and Adam very easy today. So they got off easy. So you're welcome, Mia and Adam. But for everybody else, hopefully you folks enjoyed the conversation today. We are quickly wrapping up our leadership seminar series for the semester. We have one more on May 6th. I'm sorry. Oh, was it? Oh, was that our last one?
May 20th?
May 20th. I'm sorry. Yes, May 20th with Scott Sale from HEI. So he will be closing up our semester and then we'll re-embark again in the fall. But always good to have leaders like Lori and Anne participate as a part of our leadership seminar series sponsored by the Hayashida family. And we're also very proud and honored to have Ken Hayashida, who is joining us today and actually asked a few of the questions. So thank you very much. Hopefully all of you will enjoy a happy and safe weekend. So mahalo to everyone for joining us, and mahalo to the Teranishis for sharing your experiences and your manao. So thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.